Hello, I'm Evely, and I will tell you one story. Let's go. Imani never imagined that her long-awaited pregnancy would harbor secrets that defied both logic and nature. On a sweltering afternoon in the hospital's ultrasound suite, where the sterile glare of fluorescent lights battled the encroaching shadows, she lay prone on a narrow examination table. The air was heavy with anticipation and an undercurrent of inexplicable dread. Dr. Henderson, a seasoned obstetrician with decades of experience, began the routine scan with steady hands. Yet an uneasy energy permeated the room that neither he nor Imani could quite place. The ultrasound machine's soft, rhythmic beeps filled the silence as a faint, amorphous shape danced on the screen. At first, it was the expected image of new life, a tiny, wriggling form that pulsed in synchrony with Imani's heartbeat. But as Dr. Henderson adjusted the probe to gain a clearer view, something peculiar began to manifest. A distortion crept into the image, subtle at first, a shadow that seemed to move against the natural flow of the scan. Then, in a moment that defied every principle of modern medicine, a pair of eyes appeared. Dark, deep, and unervingly sentient. Those eyes locked onto the doctor as if they had a will of their own. For a split second, time seemed to halt. Dr. Henderson's breath hitched, his usually steady hands betraying a tremor as he manipulated the controls in a desperate bid to dismiss what he assumed must be an artifact of the machine. Yet the image persisted. The fetal form, already contorted by the unnatural light of the monitor, took on grotesque features. A slight, elongated head with angles that defied symmetry, and those eyes, unblinking and filled with an ancient, unknowable malice. The presence on the screen was not that of an innocent embryo. It was something other, something that felt as though it had been waiting in the shadows for its moment to emerge. Imani's heart pounded in her chest as she whispered, "Doctor, what is that?" Her voice trembled with a mixture of wonder and horror. The room, once an emblem of hope and new beginnings, transformed into a theater of impending doom. Dr. Henderson's mind raced through fragments of old, half-forgotten legends, stories of cursed pregnancies and spectral children, whose very existence was marked by misfortune and dread. He had dismissed such tales as superstition. Yet here, in the harsh, clinical light of the ultrasound room, superstition and reality intertwined in the most terrifying manner imaginable. The overhead lights flickered sporadically as if recoiling from the unfolding nightmare, casting long, wavering shadows that crept along the whitewashed walls. A cold, almost palpable chill seeped into the room, causing Imani to shiver uncontrollably. It was as though an unseen force had breached the barrier between the natural and the supernatural, summoning an ancient presence into the confines of that stark, clinical space. The ultrasound machine's once comforting hum now seemed to beat in time with a sinister, otherworldly pulse. Dr. Henderson's eyes remained fixed on the monitor, his professional detachment rapidly eroding under the weight of what he witnessed. With each adjustment of the machine's settings, the aberrant image did not vanish but instead grew more vivid and disturbing. The pair of eyes, once a faint, almost dismissible anomaly, became unmistakably clear, their gaze intensifying to an almost unbearable degree. It was as if the creature within was not only aware of its observer but was actively engaging with him, communicating silently through that cold, predatory stare. As the tension mounted, Imani felt an inexplicable connection to the presence inside her. A sensation that was both maternal and horrifyingly foreign. A deep, resonant throb emanated from within her belly, not unlike the steady beat of a heart, yet laden with a disquieting rhythm that spoke of secrets best left undisturbed. She tried to pull her hand away from the cool surface of the examination table, but a strange, unyielding force compelled her to remain, bound to the unfolding mystery in a way she could neither understand nor escape. Then came the moment that shattered any semblance of normalcy. The ultrasound screen began to flicker violently, the image distorting as if caught in a maelstrom of static and shadow. In the brief intervals between the bursts of interference, a new figure materialized, one that bore no resemblance to the familiar contours of an unborn child. Instead, there appeared a skeletal silhouette, its form gaunt and impossibly elongated, hovering over the recognizable anatomy of the womb. Dr. Henderson's face drained of color as he leaned closer, his mind struggling to comprehend the surreal tableau before him. Had the machine somehow conjured this apparition, or was it an intrinsic part of the unholy entity dwelling within? A low, almost imperceptible murmur began to emanate from the device, a sound that could be mistaken for the whisper of wind through dead leaves, yet carried an undercurrent of malevolence that set every nerve on edge. The murmuring coalesced into a dissonant, eerie chorus as if unseen voices from a realm beyond mortal comprehension were reciting incantations in a language lost to time. Imani's eyes widened with terror and sorrow, her body trembling as she felt the boundaries between the physical and the spectral dissolve before her very eyes. In that charged, harrowing moment, the ultrasound room became a crucible for the impossible, a place where scientific certainty was appended by a presence that defied explanation. The malignant gaze on the screen, unyielding and omniscient, promised that nothing would ever be the same. The silence that followed was pregnant with a single, resounding truth: the creature within was no mere aberration of nature, but an omen of dark forces awakened from the depths of an ancient, forbidden realm. Even as Dr. Henderson's heart pounded like a death knell and Imani clutched at the remnants of her dwindling hope, the unblinking eyes on the monitor remained fixed, their silent scrutiny a chilling precursor to the terrors that lay ahead. In the aftermath of that fateful ultrasound session, the hospital's corridors became haunted by echoes of dread. Outside the ultrasound suite, the sterile white walls now bore dark stains of inexplicable sorrow, as if the very building mourned a secret long suppressed. The violent storm that had raged outside now subsided into an uneasy calm, but within the hospital an insidious presence had taken root. Imani was moved to a private room, its windows shrouded by heavy drapes that did little to obscure the pallid light of dawn. Yet even in the relative isolation of that room, she was not alone. At night, as the hospital's few remaining lights flickered weakly, a chorus of hushed voices seemed to seep from the walls. In the quiet hours before sleep, Imani's eyes would flutter open to the sound of slow, rhythmic tapping, as if something were gently drumming a morbid cadence on the floor. Each time she glanced around, the darkness would yield only shifting shapes and the lingering echo of a voice that wasn't her own. Dr. Henderson, tormented by the events of that earlier day, found himself drawn back to Imani's room. He carried with him a battered, leather-bound journal discovered in the wreckage of cryptic symbols in an abandoned ward. Its pages, written in spidery script, recounted ancient rites and the sorrow of a people long forgotten, a people whose grief and injustice had summoned a force beyond mortal reckoning. As he pored over the incantations and warnings, the doctor's rational mind was forced to confront a chilling possibility: the aberrant image on the ultrasound was not a malfunction but a manifestation of an ancestral curse, reawakened by a history of pain and oppression. That evening, as twilight bled into night, the atmosphere in Imani's room grew palpably dense. A cold wind whispered through the slightly ajar window, carrying with it the scent of rain and decay. Imani's breathing became shallow, her body shuddering with a premonition of calamity. The journal's cryptic passages began to stir memories within her, visions of a time when her ancestors, burdened by hardship and sorrow, had unknowingly called forth a force to avenge their silenced voices. In these visions, Imani saw herself as a reluctant vessel, the one who would bring forth a presence that was both a harbinger of doom and a symbol of retribution. As midnight approached, the tension in the room escalated to a fevered pitch. The overhead lights dimmed further, as if cowering from the secrets they had borne witness to. A low, guttural hum, reminiscent of an incantation uttered in a long-forgotten language, began to emanate from the walls. It was a sound that resonated deep within the marrow of one's bones, a sound that carried the weight of centuries of suffering and unhealed wounds. Imani clutched her abdomen, where an intermittent, pulsating throb now matched the cadence of the unholy murmur. The pain was sharp and insistent, yet it was intertwined with an almost magnetic pull, drawing her toward an unknown destiny. Dr. Henderson, compelled by equal parts fear and resolve, took his place at the foot of Imani's bed. He opened the journal once more and in a trembling voice recited the incantation inscribed on a yellowed page. With each syllable, the very air in the room seemed to distort, shadows stretched into unnatural forms, and the temperature plummeted as though the room were descending into an icy abyss. The doctor's eyes were fixed on Imani, whose features shifted between pain and a profound, almost hypnotic acceptance. As the incantation reached its crescendo, the room shuddered violently, and the walls themselves appeared to weep a slow, viscous fluid that glimmered in the dim light. Then, in a moment that defied both time and logic, the spectral entity emerged. No longer confined to the nebulous images on the ultrasound screen, the creature now manifested in the flesh of the room. It rose from the shadows, a grotesque fusion of human and beast, its form contorted into impossible angles. Its skin was ashen and stretched taut over a frame that seemed both ancient and maddeningly new. But it was the eyes, those twin cavernous orbs, that froze the hearts of all who beheld them. They shone with an unearthly luminescence, burning with the ferocity of accumulated anguish and defiance. In that surreal confrontation, Dr. Henderson and Imani found themselves ensnared in a psychic communion. The entity's presence flooded their minds with fragmented visions of a past steeped in betrayal and bloodshed. They witnessed a tapestry of lives interwoven by injustice, of families torn apart, of voices drowned out by the relentless march of time, and of a relentless hunger for retribution that had been incubating in the shadows for generations. Every heartbeat, every whispered incantation, was a reminder that this was not an isolated aberration, but the physical embodiment of historical sorrow and unresolved rage. As the creature advanced, its form seemed to ripple and shift, as though it were composed of countless broken memories and shattered dreams. The air vibrated with an almost tangible malice, and the boundary between the physical and the spiritual dissolved. Imani, summoning a wellspring of inner strength, began to counter the invasion with the very incantations that had summoned the entity. Her voice, though quavering, resonated with a determination born of survival and defiance. In a moment of raw vulnerability, she pleaded not only for her own salvation but for the healing of the ancestral wounds that had given birth to this terror. The room became a battleground where time itself seemed to unravel. The incantations wove through the darkness, forming a fragile barrier between the relentless force of the past and the fragile hope of redemption. Dr. Henderson joined in, his voice a steady counterpoint to the tortured whispers of the spirit. The creature recoiled, its eyes flickering with both fury and a sorrow too profound for words. In that harrowing exchange, it became clear that the ancient curse demanded a sacrifice, a relinquishing of a piece of one's soul to restore the balance between suffering and absolution. With the final, desperate words of the ritual echoing into silence, the creature's form began to disintegrate. Its screams, a cacophony of anguish and release, filled the space as it was drawn back into the spectral abyss from which it had emerged. The oppressive chill lifted, and the room's fevered energy dissipated into a fragile calm. In the aftermath, Imani slumped onto the bed, exhausted yet imbued with an unspoken promise of renewal. Dr. Henderson, forever marked by the ordeal, stared at the fading patterns on the walls, symbols of a darkness that had been vanquished for now, but which would always linger as a reminder of the past's relentless grip on the present. As the first rays of dawn filtered through the heavy drapes, the remnants of that night's terror began to melt away into the quiet inevitability of a new day. The journal lay closed on the bedside table, its secrets once again sealed away in the silence of forgotten lore. Though the creature had been banished, its echo remained, a spectral reminder that some curses are woven into the fabric of time and memory, destined to resurface when the wounds of history are left unhealed. And so, in the lingering light of morning, Imani and Dr. Henderson faced the uncertain future with tempered hope and wary hearts. The legacy of that cursed pregnancy would forever be etched into their souls, a testament to the eternal struggle between the darkness of history and the fragile light of redemption. Sight, ghostly silhouettes that drifted silently among the trunks. Amid this phantasmal parade, the eyes maintained their relentless vigil, their unblinking stare burning into his very soul. It was as if they were not merely watching him, but marking him as the next soul to be ensnared by the forest's ancient malice. Suddenly, a sharp, insistent scratching shattered the building tension. Elias spun around to see a thick curtain of underbrush rustling violently, as though something unseen scrambled away from the pale light of his lantern. The sound was quickly joined by a low, chilling laugh, a sound that seemed to slither around him, echoing off the trees with maddening persistence. In that instant, the realization struck him. These eyes were not isolated phenomena, but the vanguard of a larger, more sinister presence that lurked within the forest's depths. Every step Elias had taken now reverberated with the pulse of impending doom. The forest itself appeared to shudder, its ancient heartbeat quickening as the dark force stirred from its slumber. In the suffocating silence that followed, the gleaming eyes locked onto him with a final, unwavering intensity and unspoken promise that his intrusion would not go unpunished. As the trees exhaled a slow, almost imperceptible sigh and the darkness deepened around him, Elias stood paralyzed, caught in the relentless grip of an ancient terror. Shaken and alone, he began a desperate retreat along a path that seemed to twist and warp beneath the oppressive power of the night. The forest conspired against his every move, branches reaching out like skeletal fingers, each one brushing against him as if in a cruel warning. Behind him, the eyes continued their silent, relentless pursuit, their glow a constant reminder of the secrets and curses that dwelled in the heart of the eternal dark. And then, as if the forest itself had reached a crescendo of dread and eerie stillness descended, a pause in the macabre symphony. In that suffocating silence, the eyes shone with a final, unyielding stare, promising that this was only the beginning of a terror that would soon engulf him completely. The night air trembled with unanswered questions. What unspeakable truths lay hidden behind those unblinking eyes? And what fate awaited Elias as the shadows closed in, hungry for the souls of the unwary? With his fate uncertain and the forest's malevolent energy pressing in from all sides, Elias could only stand and stare into the abyss, his heart pounding in sync with the dark pulse of an ancient, unforgiving force. The night had barely begun to reveal its horrors, and already the promise of unspeakable terror loomed like a specter in the inky blackness. The forest had shed its familiar guise, morphing into a realm of perpetual nightmare where the boundary between reality and delusion blurred into an inescapable maelstrom of terror. Elias pressed forward, his trembling limbs barely able to support the weight of dread and disbelief. The path, once a straightforward trail through autumnal decay, had transformed into a sinuous labyrinth, each crooked branch and gnarled root conspiring to mislead him deeper into the heart of the ancient curse. The lingering silver gleam of the eyes, now more numerous and unervingly omnipresent, seemed to float on the air like baleful sentinels, following his every faltering step. As he staggered onward, the oppressive hush was punctured by a chorus of ghastly sounds. In the distance, a low, keening wail rose and fell in a rhythm that mimicked the sorrowful beating of a colossal heart. It was as if the forest itself mourned a lost eon of innocence, its voice resonating with the grief of countless souls long devoured by its insatiable hunger. Elias's mind raced, each beat of his pulse echoing the mournful lament, drawing him inexorably into a realm where time and memory unraveled. The very air shimmered with a sickly phosphorescence, and every shadow held a secret, every rustle of leaves whispered of unspeakable horrors lurking just beyond the veil of sight. Soon, the landscape gave way to an expanse that defied earthly logic, a clearing encircled by colossal, ancient trees whose bark was etched with cryptic symbols and the scars of past defilements. At the center of this clearing lay a vast, stagnant pool of water, its surface mirror-smooth under the baleful light of the spectral eyes. Drawn to it like a moth to a flame, Elias approached, his steps measured yet desperate, as if each footfall might offer a clue to the dread mystery that enshrouded him. The pool, dark as obsidian and disturbed only by the gentle ripple of unseen currents, reflected not only his terrified visage but also a shifting tableau of horrors, faces of the damned, contorted in eternal agony, and ghostly forms that seemed to reenact moments of unspeakable torment. In that harrowing reflection, Elias saw something unthinkable, an echo of his own face, yet with eyes that burned with the same unholy luminescence as those stalking him in the dark. A chill, deeper than any autumnal frost, crept along his spine as he realized that the gleaming eyes were not mere observers, but harbingers of an ancient metamorphosis. The revelation struck him with the force of a tidal wave. He was inexorably entwined with this malevolent force, his destiny bound to the forest's insidious legacy. The pool's surface began to swirl, distorting his reflection into a nightmarish mosaic of faces and forms, each one a testament to lives claimed by the forest's unyielding hunger. As if summoned by the tumult of his realization, the forest erupted into a frenzy of movement and sound. The trees themselves groaned and contorted, their branches reaching out like the gnarled fingers of forgotten deities, desperate to grasp the living essence of anyone who dared trespass. A cacophony of guttural voices rose from the undergrowth, a dissonant litany of incantations and curses that clawed at the fringes of sanity. Amid this chaos, the gleaming eyes multiplied in an almost maddening dance, swirling around Elias with a hypnotic rhythm that threatened to erase his very sense of self. Elias stumbled backward, his mind reeling as he struggled to differentiate between the tangible horrors and the phantasms of his unraveling psyche. Every instinct screamed for escape, yet his feet remained rooted to the sodden earth. A sudden, thunderous crack split the air, a sound not unlike the anguished cry of a dying beast. Before him, an enormous oak, ancient beyond reckoning, split asunder, revealing within its hollow trunk a chamber bathed in an eerie, pulsating light. From this fissure emerged a figure draped in tattered robes, its face obscured by a hood. The figure moved with an unsettling grace, its presence exuding an aura of both dread and sorrow. In a voice that trembled like the rustle of dead leaves, it spoke, "You have been chosen, Elias, your soul is the key to our liberation." The words reverberated in his mind, each syllable a thread weaving him tighter into the tapestry of the curse. The hooded figure advanced slowly, and with every step, the forest around them seemed to recoil and then surge forward in a vicious cycle of motion. The spectral eyes flared with a ghastly light as if in recognition of the ancient ritual now unfolding before Elias's horrified gaze. The figure's hands moved in intricate, deliberate gestures, and the very ground shuddered in response, as if acknowledging the summoning of a primordial force. The air grew thick with the metallic tang of blood and the fetid odor of decay as unseen forces converged in a climactic crescendo of dread. In that crushing moment, Elias's internal torment became a tangible reality. The spectral figure's incantations unlocked a torrent of memories not his own, a cascade of centuries of suffering, betrayal, and the relentless cycle of death that had long plagued this forsaken place. He saw visions of other hapless wanderers, their eyes mirroring his own terror, now trapped in an endless loop of torment, their souls forever enslaved to the ancient power that ruled the forest. The gleaming eyes were the gatekeepers of this nightmare, the eternal sentinels of a legacy that had transcended time and space. With a final, soul-crushing surge, the power of the forest descended upon Elias. He felt an invisible force clawing at his heart, tearing at the very fabric of his being. The overwhelming terror threatened to drown him in a sea of despair. Yet, in the midst of that overwhelming darkness, a spark of defiance flickered within him, a primal instinct, the last vestige of a man determined to reclaim his fate. With a guttural cry that reverberated through the cursed clearing, Elias lunged forward, desperate to confront the spectral figure and break free of the insidious grip that had claimed him. But fate, as it always does in this accursed domain, was unyielding. The hooded figure's eyes, now unveiled to reveal a void of infinite sorrow, met his gaze. In that moment, time seemed to shatter. Elias's defiant cry was swallowed by the cacophony of spectral lamentations and the relentless murmur of the ancient curse. The forest, in a final act of cruel irony, enveloped him in its dark embrace. The luminous eyes burned brighter than ever before, marking him not as a victim but as the next vessel of its undying malice. As the clearing fell into a heavy silence punctuated only by the distant, echoing keening of tormented souls, the ancient forest resumed its watchful vigil. The spectral figure vanished into the swirling mists, leaving behind only the memory of a promise that the cycle of horror was unending and that every soul who dared trespass into the realm of the gleaming eyes would ultimately be claimed. And somewhere, in the deepest recesses of that nightmarish labyrinth, Elias's anguished cries mingled with the eternal lament of the damned, a testament to the fact that in this forsaken place, terror was not a passing shadow but a living, breathing force that would haunt the world for eternity. Thank you very much and see you all in the next video.